be solving multi-step equations in this video. We're going to start with the easier ones and work our way up to the more complex ones. So what we want to do is we just want to start right here with a simple two-step equation. 5x plus 8 equals negative 2. Now we remember, when we're solving an equation, what you're doing is you're working your order of operations backwards. So let's review those real quick. You remember? Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Parentheses, exponents, then we multiply and divide from left to right, then we add and subtract from left to right. Okay, now, you know when you're doing operations, you work in this order. When we solve, we're working backwards. So we're going to go way that way. So that means when we're solving equations, we do add and subtract first. Then we go to the multiply and divide. Then we go to the exponents. Then we go to the parentheses last. Alright, or when we're solving. So let's start right here. Now every equation has two sides, so I always like to draw my wall down my equal side to separate my two sides because we have to keep our equation balanced. The next thing you do before you ever get started is you identify the variable you're solving for. I'm looking here and I see x is what I'm solving for, so I like to put a little bitty circle around that so I can see it. Now, knowing that I'm going to solve for x, that means I have to get x all by itself. We call that isolating the variable. That means we have to get rid of the 5 that's next to the x, and we have to get rid of that 8 that's on that side with the x. Once we get those numbers gone and that x is all by itself, then the equation is going to be solved. That's the whole thing that we're doing. We just have to learn that we have to do it in the order of operations backwards. Alright, so we look at our 5 and our 8, and we've got to get rid of them. So we got to know which one we get rid of first. Well, knowing that I'm doing my order of operations backwards, I always start with add and subtract. So you look at the 5 and you look at the 8. Which one of them has been added or subtracted to the x? The 8 has, because it's a plus 8. When we get rid of that 8, we always do the opposite of what's going on. The plus 8, the opposite of plus is, of course, subtract. So if I want to get rid of that 8, and that's what I want to do, I'm going to subtract the 8. If I subtract it from one side, you know you got to come over here and you got to subtract it on the other side. You've got to keep your equation balanced. It's like a seesaw. It's got to be balanced. Okay? If you have 8 and you take 8 away, that cancels those out. That leaves 0. You have nothing left. If you have negative 2 and you take 8 away from that, that's going to leave you a negative 10. Now once we've got that done, everything we didn't use, we bring down. So I didn't use my 5x, so I'm going to bring that down. Now remember, we're still solving for x, so if you want to go ahead and you want to circle your x, just to keep that identified, that's fine with me. What we have here, though, left is the 5x. Now you have to realize that that is 5 times x. So if we want to get rid of that 5, and that's what we want to do, because that's the only number left there with the x, we have to do the opposite of whatever's going on there with that x, that 5x. Since it's times, the opposite of times is divide. So if we want to get rid of the times 5, we have to divide 5. And you know if you do it on one side, you got to come over here and do it on the other side. Okay, if you have 5 divided by 5, that makes 1. That cancels that out. Okay, that leaves the x all by itself, and that's what we wanted. And over here on the right, if we go negative 10 divided by 5, we know that gives us negative 2. And there's our solution. That was easy peasy, wasn't it? Let's try one more, make sure we've got that figured out. If I've got a negative 3x minus 4 equals to 5, let's separate our sides. Find your variable. Look at the numbers that you've got to get rid of. I've got to get rid of that negative 3, and I've got to get rid of that 4. Which one do we get rid of first? Remember, let's go back and look for a second. We're going to do our order of operations backwards. So we're always going to do the add or subtract first before we do anything else. So which one is adding and subtracting? They both have minus signs. Which one is it? If you look, that is a subtract 4. The 3, that's a negative 3 times x. So what we'll do is we'll get rid of the subtract 4 by doing the opposite of subtract, which is add 4, plus 4, both sides. 5 plus 4 gives me 9. See how I canceled that negative 4 plus 4? Because that's left a 0. That left nothing. They canceled. Now what we do is we bring it down. What we didn't use over there on the left side, we're going to bring down that negative 3x. Okay, all that's left here, because we're isolating for x, or isolating that variable, is to get rid of that negative 3. That is negative 3 times x. So you have to be careful here. That's negative 3 times x. You do the opposite of times. The opposite of times is divide. Divide negative 3 there on both sides. A lot of people try to add 3. They mess up. That is not x minus 3. That is a negative 3 times x. Divide the negative 3. When you divide that, that leaves 1. That cancels and leaves the x like we wanted. 9 divided by negative 3 is a negative 3. So there's our solution. All right, remember, when you're solving an equation, you just work your order of operations backwards. That's how you always know which number to get rid of first. Okay, let's do another example, one that's written a little bit different. X over 4 minus 1 equals to 5. Okay, a lot of people is going to get confused on this one, but don't get confused. Let's just start slowly. Separate your two sides, and then find your variable. We're going to isolate the variable. That means we've got to get rid of the 4, and we've got to get rid of the 1. Which one will we get rid of first? Following our order of operations backwards, we'll get rid of the add or subtract first. Has the 4 been added or subtracted, or has the 1 been added or subtracted? Well, the 1 has. So it's been subtracted, so we do the opposite to get rid of it. The opposite of subtract 1 is add 1. You always do it on both sides. You do it to one, you do it to the other. It's kind of like giving kids candy. You have to give everybody candy if you give one person candy, because it's not fair. So you do it to both sides the same way as you give candy. All right, now negative 1 plus 1 makes nothing. It makes 0, so they cancel. 5 plus 1 makes 6. Okay? Bring down this x over 4. Now, this is where people get confused. Don't. We're still isolating the variable. What does that little line there mean? What does that x and then that line and that 4 mean? It means you're going to divide. That's x divided by 4. So all you have to do to get rid of that 4, since it's a divided by 4, you do the opposite of divided by 4, which is multiply by 4. So we're going to go times 4. If you times 4 on the left side, you've got to times 4 on the right side. 4 divided by 4 cancels, makes 1, brings your x. 6 times 4 is 24. So my answer is x equals to 24. Okay, let's get into a little bit harder problem here. Let's say that I want 4x minus 8 plus x equals to 2. Okay, when I look at this, I think to myself, well, gosh, I'm going to split down the side there to have my two sides. But when I try to find the variable that I'm looking to solve for, I see that there's 2 of them. So in this case, when you have 2 of them, what you've got to do is you've got to combine those if they're on the same side. Fortunately, right here, they are both on the same side of my equation. So I just combine them, and combine means add. 4x, and you add another x to it, and that's going to make 5x's all together. Now, once you've got that done, you bring everything down that you didn't use, like your minus 8 here, and your equals 2. And then you've just got that 2-step that we had, like we had on the other 3 problems that we did. We have our 1x that we're trying to solve for. So when we get rid of the numbers around it, do we get rid of the 5 first or the 8 first? We get rid of the 8 first. Since it's a minus 8, you do the opposite of minus 8, you plus 8 on both sides. 2 plus 8 gives me 10. I didn't use my 5x, so we bring it down. I'm still solving for my x here. So I do need to get rid of that 5. That is 5 times x. So to get rid of times, you do the opposite. Opposite of times is divide. Divide by 5 on both sides. Those 5's make 1. That cancels, leaves x. 10 divided by 5 is 2. So my solution is x equals to 2. Let's try one here that has parentheses in it. Now, earlier I said when we get ready to solve an equation, we know we work our order of operations backwards, which would tell you that you need to do your parentheses last. That's true, except in this case, you have a variable in the parentheses, so you can't leave your variable, you can't leave the parentheses till last. You're going to have to take care of them now first. So what we do is we get rid of the parentheses by doing that property, and I know you all know that property right there is the distributive property. You're just going to go 5 times x. That gives us 5x. You bring down the sign in the middle, which is plus, and then you go 5 times 3, and that's 15. Once you've got that distributive property done, the parentheses are through, everything else you didn't use just comes straight down. That's x plus, and then equals, and a 33. Now there's no longer parentheses, so now we can isolate our variable, right? Well, not just yet. I have more than one variable. I have a variable here and I have a variable here, so what I have to do is I have to combine those just like in the problem we just did. When you combine an x and a 5x, you're going to get 6x's. Once that's done, everything you didn't use, you just bring straight down. And now we've got a 2-step. And we solve this 2-step just like we were solving the other ones in the beginning. Isolate the variable. To solve for x, we need to get rid of 15 first by subtracting 15. That cancels. 33 minus 15 gives me 18. Bring down my 6x. I'm still isolating my x, so I need to get rid of the 6. It's 6 times x, so we divide to get rid of times on both sides. And 18 divided by 6 gives me 3. We have solved multi-step equations in here. We've done 2 steps. We did some where we had to combine like terms. We did some with parentheses. Each teacher kind of teaches these in different orders, but all you have to remember is to make sure when you're solving an equation is to follow your order of operations backwards, and you'll solve it correctly every time.